So with DFR 2.0, you're removing the rooftop personnel by replacing the drone and the power management with a drone dock solution. And you replace the visual airspace management done by a human with electronic sensors like radar, optical, or acoustic, either as single systems or fused together into a system of systems.
You're listening to the Drone Radio Show podcast, the show about drones and the people who use them for business, fun, and research. Hosted by Randy Goers.
Hello, everyone. This is Randy Goers, and welcome to the Drone Radio Show podcast, episode 413. How will smaller, more powerful radar sensors change the way drones are used in first responder programs? For that question, we head to Burlington, Massachusetts to speak with David Cameron, Field Services Engineer and Lead UAS Pilot at MatrixSpace. MatrixSpace is a radar sensing company that produces the next generation of AI-enabled sensing that can identify objects and collect data in real time with no cloud requirements. The company builds the smallest radar system to provide new levels of integrated outdoor surveillance, monitoring, and inspection from both stationary and airborne platforms. One of the promising uses for MatrixSpace radar systems is enhancing drone as first responder, or DFR programs. The small size and powerful capabilities of the sensors mean police departments using drones as first responders can deliver improved service and safety while at the same time eliminate the need for rooftop visual observers. David brings 33 years of service with the City of Campbell Police Department, where he held a variety of critical roles, most recently leading the department's DFR operations. He remains a reserve officer with the department. In this episode of the Drone Radio Show, David talks about MatrixSpace, the evolution of drone as first responder programs, and how MatrixSpace sensors can improve safety and operational efficiency of future DFR missions. But before we hear from David, I want to stress that your support is the heartbeat of my podcast. Every episode is crafted with you in mind, and your generous donations ensure I can keep delivering the content you love. Whether it's the price of a coffee or a more substantial contribution, every bit helps to defray the cost of production. Donate today and be a vital part of the podcast's continued journey to greatness. And for a limited time, donate $100 or more and receive an official Drone Radio Show coffee mug. To donate, go to droneradioshow.com/donate. And if you can, please subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform and leave a nice review and rating on iTunes. It really helps improve the podcast ranking among the many thousands of active podcasts today. So let's learn how small, powerful radar sensors can enhance drone as first responder programs with David Cameron of MatrixSpace. Let's pick up the interview where I asked David to introduce himself.
My name is David Cameron. I'm a field services engineer with MatrixSpace located in Burlington, Massachusetts.
David, could you start by giving us an overview of MatrixSpace? What does the company do?
So MatrixSpace was a company founded in 2019 by some Northeastern alumni, and we have corporate headquarters located in Burlington, Massachusetts, and also in Hoffman Estates. And we have built the smallest radar system to provide a new level of integrated outdoor area surveillance. It's the smallest in size and price range. We're addressing the next generation of low power, low cost Doppler radar, which is a software defined radar, and all the tracks and processing occurs on board each panel, which is something that's unique. Our goal is really to digitize the outdoor space for higher awareness, security, and response for law enforcement, DoD, and other private security entities.
That's quite impressive. Based on some recent articles, I'm particularly interested in the evolution of drone technology in first responder scenarios. How did you get involved with drone first responder programs?
I work for the Campbell Police Department. I've got 33 years in total in law enforcement with Campbell, located in California. I've had several roles, including SWAT, traffic enforcement, major accident investigation team, crime scene, financial crimes. I started our drone program along with our chief of police, our current chief of police, Gary Berg, who was a captain at the time. We started it back in 2018. He handled all the heavy lifting with the mayor and city council and getting everything approved there. And I handled all of the research and how to figure out how to do everything with the FAA to gather waivers and our COAs and what equipment to use. I retired in 2019, but I still work for Campbell as a retiree. And I've continued the drone program is my main job there part-time because I invested a lot of time and interest into the program and I want to see it succeed. In late 2022, we applied for Beyond Visual Line of Sight DFR waiver and it was approved. And we started running our DFR program in 2023. Currently, we are working towards this new DFR 2.0 to remove visual observer or RPIC from the roof and turning it into a single operator system. So with MatrixSpace, I started working for MatrixSpace in 2022 as an independent contractor. I had met the CEO. We had struck up a relationship. And in 2023, I joined full-time as a field services engineer, working with the business development team, marketing, our DFR law enforcement liaison.
For our listeners who might be new to this concept, could you explain what a drone first responder program entails?
The overview of a drone first responder program is to allow for drones to be remotely operated by teleoperators within a communication center or a command post at a police department to remotely launch them to incoming emergency and non-emergent calls, essentially anything that might help law enforcement ground units respond to the scene before ground units get there and be able to provide critical pre-arrival information. And that could be anything from crimes in progress to major collisions to residential or commercial fires and giving information to the fire department on pre-arrival. It started back in 2017 with the city of Chula Vista, who started down the road of researching what it would take to do something like this and deploying drones ahead of ground units. They did a lot of work with the FAA, and in 2018, led by Fritz Reber and Don Redmond, they began to deploy these drones from rooftops from the police department, responding to 911 calls. Their current drone program still requires a rooftop RPIC or remote pilot in charge and or a visual observer to handle the drone itself, to handle the battery swaps, to make sure that the controller is connected to the drone so that they can conduct the safe operations. And today there's only about 40 or 50 departments in the nation that are running DFR programs with a Beyond Visual Line of Sight waiver.
With the emergence of DFR 2.0, moving from traditional models to a more streamlined single operator system, how do you see this changing the landscape of emergency response?
Well, first, I got to give credit to Anders Martin of UAS Norway, who really has coined that term, DFR 2.0. They had a conference not too long ago down in Chula Vista, hosted by Chula Vista, called DFR 2.0. But he's the one who kind of coined that term. So as we use it, I try to give him credit for where credit is due. So with DFR 2.0, you're removing the rooftop personnel by replacing the drone and the power management with a drone dock solution. And you replace the visual airspace management done by a human with electronic sensors like radar, optical, or acoustic, either as single systems or fused together into a system of systems, coupled with ADS-B reception for general aviation aircraft broadcasting. The goal is really to turn it into a single teleoperator program being run remotely from a control room in a police department, remotely launching the drones from this dock solution. This approach is saving personnel cost and saving personnel scheduling, because currently we have to have two people scheduled to be able to do operations. But it allows the drone to be used for both emergent and non-emergent calls. In some cases, the drone can clear calls without having ground units or ground personnel even respond to the call. But that frees them up for other proactive activities or other emergency calls.
Does anyone in the United States have a DFR 2.0 program in place?
There is one department who has a no VO beyond visual line of sight waiver, and that is Pearland Police Department. That program was put together by Brandon Carr, who is still helping that program along. He currently works for DroneSense, who is a remote piloting software for DFR operations.
Transitioning to DFR 2.0 must present some unique challenges, both in terms of hardware and manpower. Could you elaborate on these hurdles and how they're being addressed?
The main challenge for any of these DFR programs, like I said earlier, was staffing. And trying to get into this DFR 2.0, the biggest challenges are going to be sensor exception or visual observers being accepted by the FAA. Again, there's one program that's Pearland who has it accepted. It's a optical system, so they're limited to daytime operations currently. And there are still some shortcomings with hardware. The software dock integrations are being worked on, and they are very close to being done and definitely in late beta stage. Things we're doing at Campbell is we are being that beta tester for sensors and hardware for this DFR 2.0. But I think it's going to catch up pretty quick. Brandon Carr, who I mentioned, he and I are collaborating on a template for this DFR 2.0 operations, and we're hoping to use Campbell as the industry example for that.
Regarding the technology for these sensors, is it currently available and capable of fulfilling the role of a digital spotter effectively?
Yeah, the technology is there. Radar, optical, and ADS-B, it's all there. It's a matter of getting the FAA to understand that the digital technology outdoes the human eyeball or ear in detecting a general aviation aircraft entering the area and being able to determine whether it needs to be deconflicted or not from a drone operation. They very much relied on the wet eyeball as that airspace management, and almost any digital system will do better than a human. Now, the ADS-B by itself is an amazing system, but that is only when you have cooperative aircraft who are broadcasting ADS-B. Your optical and radar come in to leverage for your non-cooperative aircraft. Those in areas that are not broadcasting ADS-B, they're not popping up, you can't receive their location. So your optical and radar solutions are what's needed. And I really think that sweet spot is a radar, optical, and ADS-B fused technology, because you've got redundant systems. I neglected to use auditory systems because there are auditory systems out there, but I am not familiar with them at all, and I'm not familiar that they've been implemented for DFR operations.
And to clarify for our audience, the primary function of these digital spotters is to detect manned aircraft entering an area where a drone might interfere with it, correct?
Yeah, it's to deconflict crewed aircraft incursions into the drone operating area. So, because it is our responsibility to deconflict from the crewed aircraft if it comes into an area. So we've got to have this system of systems that will notify us of a potential incursion, and then give us data on, if for my operating area, just for instance, let's say I have a manned aircraft incursion into like a north end of my operating area, but I'm at the far south end of my operating area, and the direction and speed of the crewed aircraft is going in a completely deconflicted direction when we even start the mission or when we're doing our mission. There's really no reason for deconfliction at that point. You've got to be able to see the aircraft, where it is, where your drone is, and in operation, and do you need a deconfliction? And if a deconfliction happens, what are your procedures for deconfliction? Typically, it's a stop and it's a lowering of your altitude to a safe altitude to deconflict from the crewed aircraft, wait for the crewed aircraft to clearly exit the area, and then continue your mission.
What do you need to actually remove the visual spotters?
To be able to get that RPIC or visual observer who manages all the drone power and turning it on, turning it off, to get rid of them on the roof or turn it to a single person operation, we have to have some sort of drone dock. There are a couple solutions out there for drone docks, and basically they're waterproof, they're weather resistant, weatherproof. They manage charging the drone, they manage launch and recovery of the drone. And that's the only way we're going to be able to do these missions remotely and get it down to a single person, where they can come in the morning, they can do their safety checks, they can do their test deployments in the morning and recoveries, and then start their day without having to go to a roof, without having to go through this complex setup of a pop-up to protect the rooftop operator. They have to have communications between the rooftop operator and the teleoperator. You're really streamlining the system to where it really is a force multiplier. I mean, you get in a catch-22 when you're trying to do a system that is supposed to be a force multiplier when it requires two people to operate. You really want to get it down to a single person operation.
Let's delve into the operational aspects. How does a mission unfold under the new system, starting from the drone's deployment to the operator's control?
Yeah, most of the teleoperation systems right now, and I'm going to be agnostic to any names, but the vast majority of the teleoperation systems available now, you pre-program a mission by clicking on a map on where you want it to go, or you can type in a particular address. You've already pre-designated your launch area for minimum and max altitudes. They're already pre-programmed in. Speeds, all your variables you need for safety. And then you launch the drone. It will remotely fly to that scene. You can manually take over at any point. But once it gets to the scene, then it can revert over to a manual operation. I am very much a proponent on the law enforcement side of having manual operation at a scene. That gives the teleoperator, who in our case is a sworn police officer, the ability to determine how the drone is being used at a particular emergency.
So in this setup, the role traditionally played by human spotters is now managed by software and sensors. How does that work?
The digital visual observer can notify the teleoperator. The teleoperator needs to make that decision on what they're going to do for deconfliction. Currently, there are no teleoperation systems and drones that I'm aware of that work together to do an automated deconfliction, which would mean the drone is immediately notified remotely by itself. It decides whether there's a problem and then makes a move. It does require the teleoperator to either push a pre-programmed button or do some sort of entry to conduct the deconfliction.
I should have asked this question earlier, but what's the overall goal of a drone first responder program?
The main goal of the DFR program is officer safety. Safety of officers, safety of the public in getting that pre-arrival information. Chula Vista has put out several great case studies showing how the drone and the perspective of the teleoperator seeing where, from the drone, being able to see something on the ground, relaying that to officers kind of dictated how officers would respond to that scene. So as an example, you'll get a reporting party call 911 and say there's a man with a gun waving a gun around in front of a restaurant. And this is one of the Chula Vista scenarios that happened. Drone gets there first. The drone operator is able to zoom in, and they do see a gun in the person's hand. But following them around, and you may be familiar with this story, following him around for a bit in front of this restaurant, he eventually pulls out a cigarette and uses this gun to light the cigarette, and it was a cigarette lighter. Now, relaying that information to ground units before they get there and allow them to formulate a plan dramatically changed how they would have normally gone into this of a potential active shooter, a potential somebody assaulting somebody with a real firearm. Not to say that he didn't have a real gun on him somewhere, so they still have to be cautious. But they were fairly confident from the drone operator's perspective that what he had currently in his hand was a lighter and not a real firearm. So they were able to approach that situation much different than they normally would. And that is a life-saving event in some cases, because officers can only go by sometimes the limited information given to them by a dispatcher who's getting it from somebody else.
Ideally, how many drones are needed for an effective DFR 2.0 program?
We're starting off with 2 drone docks in Campbell. We would like to expand to at least 5. And it's not that we need the 5 for area coverage, but when you do, the disadvantage of going to a dock system is that once the drone is out and it's on scene, it's got to come back and it's got to recharge. If you have somebody on the roof who can immediately change batteries, then that same drone can be redeployed again. But if there is some recharge time, you're going to need another drone on standby that can immediately launch either back to the same call or continue on to different calls. So we're starting off with 2 drones right now. 3 drones, I think, for our department would be a good sweet spot for that. But other departments that are larger would have to go with many more to be able to do that overlapped coverage on prolonged scenes. There is also working in your ground teams. So we have in our department a team of UAS operators who carry drones in their trunk. They're smaller, backpack deployed at scene. And these drones can also be worked into a teleoperation system. So you could have a drone operator at the scene start his drone up, activate it, and then have a teleoperator take over the flight of that drone at the scene. And now you can free up that officer who was on scene because now you've got the teleoperator who's operating the drone for that incident that was launched at the scene. We have not yet tried that, but that is definitely something that's on our roadmap. And several companies are looking at that as also a way to augment dock deployed drones.
David, you touched upon the challenges with FAA approval and the regulatory landscape. Could you delve a bit deeper into these barriers and how MatrixSpace is navigating them?
We're working on some working groups, and MatrixSpace is part of working groups to try to work with the FAA on getting these systems accepted by the FAA. The FAA will tell you they do not certify systems. They will not certify. They will not give you a little thing that says, yeah, your system's certified. All they're going to do is accept your system. And we're going to have to produce not just MatrixSpace, but any other sensor. They're going to have to produce some test studies. Part of Campbell testing is providing not just MatrixSpace, but D-Drone, who is providing an optical system for us, providing them with real 24/7 live data. Even when we're not running our missions, that data feed will be available to them for telemetry collection so that they can do studies on it for improvement. The other thing we'd like to do as part of our waiver is make it scalable, not lock it into, let's say a current system's capabilities is X today, but in 6 months it is now Y, and it's a larger area. We don't want to have to go back to the FAA and say, okay, now we got to reapply again because we have a larger operating area we can work in because the system's capabilities. We want to be able to scale up with the systems under a waiver. So again, we're collaborating on a concept of operation, which hopefully will get accepted that does just that, along with these fused sensors.
Regarding Campbell's waiver, has it been submitted and accepted, or are you still in the process of fine-tuning it with the FAA?
We're working on the CONOP right now. The waiver process for law enforcement is, especially for beyond visual line of sight, is you build out this concept of operation. The traditional program now is very much streamlined. If you're going with a traditional program, I saw an agency the other day that had a 2-page CONOP, and it was everything the FAA asked for in safety was spelled out in it, and they were approved at beyond visual line of sight, COA. For what we're going for is going to be a little different. So it's going to require going back to the 91-113 waiver team and FAA safety for them to review our CONOP. So we want to be very diligent in how we write it and get feedback from them so it's not just sitting on a desk collecting dust.
That's a significant step forward. In terms of timelines, what are you aiming for?
We'd like to get our systems up, and right now, what's holding us back on our systems is a property management company for the building we want to mount them on. So it has nothing to do with the technology. And we plan on getting the digital visual observer systems up and running next to our current manned DFR program. So we can at least start getting data and the teleoperator can start utilizing the digital visual observer alongside our wet eyeballs. As far as the ConOp, we are hoping to submit that fairly soon. There's a few things we need to air out, and Brandon and I are currently going over the best way to word things. If it doesn't get accepted the first time around, then we will just pull it, and then we'll figure out what the FAA is hoping to look for. We're hoping to get direct feedback from their safety teams, though.
When considering community coverage, does it require a dense network of sensors, or is it more about strategic placement?
In a system of systems, you may have one system, like the optical system in our case, can see much further than the radar system can during the day. But at night, the radar system can see where the optical system can't. So you may have this combined waiver of during the day you have X amount of operating area. During the night, you may have a reduced operating area. And then it's on how cities want to deploy them. Do they want to work on their hotspot areas? Because a lot of cities, you don't need coverage based on the heightened of crime in that area. They may not need coverage for a drone where they want to concentrate on more of their downtown areas or crime hotspots. So it's kind of subjective on like how many sensors are needed, because it depends on what you want to do in the end. And it depends on how big your coverage area is you're looking at.
It sounds like a complex but necessary analysis. Just goes to show it's not as simple as putting a drone in a box and saying we're good to go.
Like MatrixSpace, we have a web tool that one of our engineers built that takes into account all the variables that the FAA gives us for determining well, clear, and perception reaction distance. I'm calling it perception reaction distance, but I think there's another proper term for it. That then determines what your safe operating area is. And then there's a way to line up sensors, let's say around a perimeter, where you're actually creating more of an operating area in the middle, because there's no way for crewed aircraft to get to the middle without going through the outside perimeter of your perception and reaction distances. So there are certain ways of enlarging your operating area. In Campbell, we're starting with one set of sensors in one location. So we'll have kind of a limited operating area, but that we're doing that just to try to get these sensors accepted. And then we'll expand coverage throughout the city as we obtain more sensors and decide where they want to go. Then we can expand operations with the sensor coverage. That's our goal.
As a city planner, I realize that community involvement is crucial in projects like this. At this stage, how are you engaging with the public? And what's your perspective on the importance of involving the community in a DFR program?
Well, I think it's really important to address all the stakeholders. Now, when we first started our program in 2018, just our regular drone program, we had one drone, 2 pilots, and our city council and our mayor, regardless of their political spectrum, all agreed, hey, I think this is a great idea. We at Campbell have had historically in the high 90s approval rating from our citizens in our police services. So we were fairly confident that going through with this one drone, we wouldn't need to go to a public debate on it. Now, as we expanded our drone program over several years, and now we're getting to the DFR program, we went to city council, and it was our recommendation that we need to open this up to the public. Was the article I wrote, and I referenced from drone responders the 5 C's of a responsible drone program. And the first one is that community engagement and transparency, and engaging all the stakeholders, engaging any civil rights organizations that might be in your city. But it's subjective based on the size of your city and what is the relationship your police department and city have with its own citizens. There are cities where citizens are very supportive, and there are cities that, rightly so, they may be suspect of their police department and want to know clearly what they're going to do with a drone. So we did open that up for public debate in Campbell. We had all of 2 people want to put in any response to that, and it was both positive responses. So it is up to each city to individually make that decision, but you want to really address those stakeholders with the community.
That's a key aspect of public trust. Looking ahead, For those interested in following the progress of the Campbell program, what are some of the key milestones or developments we should watch for in the coming months?
You can call it beta testing, for not just us, but for everyone. We're trying to be an innovator to help a lot of people out. We're not really putting out anything to the public regarding our steps. We have our DFR program. Public is aware of that. This is just enhancing and adding to it. So, right now, the next step is to get our sensors in place so we can start getting test data to start doing more validations for all of our industry partners who are contributing, getting our CONOP in and accepted. And once the CONOP is in and is accepted, then we can start scaling up on sensors. We still haven't got our drone docks installed. We're working through that process right now. We've discovered a few hidden costs within the purchase of drone docks and the installation that we are trying to work through right now. But we'll have to get that full system up and running. But until then, we'll run our traditional system alongside the new sensors that will just help out with the data collection and validation.
Based on your experience, how do you envision the future of DFR programs and beyond visual line of sight operations? Where do you see this heading?
I think beyond visual line of sight programs, not just for law enforcement, but the drone industry are going to expand. They're going to continue to expand. Again, not just law enforcement, but utility inspections. Everybody's having the same problem of manpower, man cost, or person power, person cost, remote operations to do line inspections, the advent of air taxis. There's got to be some airspace management in place. And I almost think the industry is using law enforcement as a testing bed for beyond visual line of sight operations and daily operations to be able to look at as a stepping stone model. Once we get into vertiports and things like that, unmanned aircraft activities are just going to continue to expand. And it's going to require a system of fused sensors to help mitigate air-to-air incidents.
Is there anything that we missed that we should talk about?
The civil liberties and privacy protection is something that everybody is worried about with drones and law enforcement. Under the Fourth Amendment, there's currently case law that controls or watches over the use of drones, but the case law comes from rotary and fixed wing aircraft use in law enforcement. Now, we could, as a drone program, we could fly around and we could just wait and look for crimes to happen. We do that on the ground. When we drive around, we're looking around. When the helicopters are in the air, they're looking around on patrol. However, I caution departments from using drones for purposeful monitoring of the public, because I don't think you or I or anybody else wants to look up and see a drone from a government agency over them, even if they're not the subject of what the drone is doing, and they're just going to think Big Brother is watching them. We want to be very clear and transparent that we're responding to emergency calls or those other incidents that can help ground units and assist law enforcement or other first responders. The term surveillance always comes up. The vast majority of articles or publications or blogs or podcasts use the term surveillance inappropriately. The term surveillance is a very specific legal term, which means you are signaling out an individual or group of individuals to monitor them for criminal activity. And with that, if it is what you're doing is surveillance, that falls under the Fourth Amendment as a search, and you need a search warrant. That is not what we're doing. The term surveillance is being used too broadly in these articles, and I think it's more of a buzzword they're using to get people's attention. So, for our policies, the word surveillance is in there, but we're not going to conduct true surveillance without a search warrant. And we're not going to be using drones for purposeful patrolling, waiting for things to happen. They're specifically to respond to emergency calls or incidents that people report to us, or ground units request the assistance of drones.
How do the radar sensors that MatrixSpace produces fit into a DFR 2.0 solution?
The MatrixSpace radar is this low weight, low power, low price, a radar panel. It's about the size of a cell phone. And it's about let's say three cell phones thick. It runs on 25 watts of power. You put 3 or 4 of these together. You could power them with the solar panel and backup batteries for day and night use. And we tie that into all the radar data into a user interface. But we also have industry partners we've already integrated with to push our raw radar data into their particular systems. And we're just trying to create that safer airspace. It also can be used for perimeter protection for utilities, DoD facilities, or other secure facilities. We could track both air and ground targets.
Ann O'Leary, who oversees marketing efforts for MatrixSpace, provides an added perspective on the scalability of these smaller, lightweight radar systems.
MatrixSpace radar is something that can be deployed very easily and cost effectively, basically to create safe ground and air space. And DFR is a prime example, but there are many, many other applications where that's been pretty difficult to date because radar has been so expensive. It's usually military grade or the radar that goes in autonomous vehicles, which is a very short range. So the big change here is to enable a DFR program that is able to get BVLOS waivers so that it can scale. And then same with, critical infrastructure. This also applies to things like search and rescue or drone detection around prisons. If you implement a radar like MatrixSpace radar, it immediately creates this zone that allows for that BVLOS flight.
Our goal is to make this a more portable, scalable radar system that's available to a greater portion of the industry because of its size, weight, and cost.
And for my final question, David, what message would you like to leave regarding the future of the drone industry?
I can only speak for a small segment of the industry and drone operations. However, getting acceptance of these few sensor technologies beyond visual line of sight operations for these first responders or other individuals such as utility inspections will just make it easier for the larger drone market that is looking to expand to air taxis, vertiports, and other unmanned aircraft activities.
That's it for episode 413 of the Drone Radio Show. I hope you enjoyed hearing from David Cameron of MatrixSpace. I want to thank David for taking the time to speak with me. If you want to learn more about MatrixSpace or want to connect with David, check out the webpage at matrixspace.com. If you like the Drone Radio Show, then please subscribe and share. Write a glowing review on iTunes. And if you're able, donate to keep the podcast going. Go to droneradioshow.com/donate. And thanks for listening. Your support means a lot to me, and I hope you'll listen to more episodes of the Drone Radio Show podcast to hear how others are using drones for business, fun, and research. For the Drone Radio Show, I'm Randy Goers.
This has been the Drone Radio Show podcast. More information on today's show can be found on our website at www.droneradioshow.com. If you're using drone technology for business, fun, or research and would like to share your experience on the show, please visit our website and fill out a guest appearance application. And don't forget to follow us on your favorite social media channels.